It's time now for the Success is Subjective podcast. Here is your host and therapeutic consultant for young adults only, Joanna Lilley.
Hi, and welcome to the show. If you're new here, I'm glad to have you. This podcast was formed to collectively build a bank of stories from normal people sharing their nonlinear paths. Unfortunately, social media paints a narrow picture of what success looks like. So I'm doing my best to spread the news that changing course is common, and you don't have to know what you want to do the rest of your life at 18. If you're a parent worried about your young adult and whether their path is leading them to success, you're in the right place. I'm a therapeutic consultant who works with young adults to connect them with resources that'll help them get back on a better path. So if you're curious, let's chat. You can schedule a free consultation through my website, which you can find the link for in the show notes. Today, my guest is Dr. Tim Jordan. Tim, as he asked me to call him, is a developmental and behavioral pediatrician in private practice in St. Louis, Missouri. He counsels girls in grade school through college on issues related to or including friendships, anxiety, stress, finding your purpose, school pressures, family relationships, and more. He also hosts a weekly podcast titled Raising Daughters, is an international speaker, a YPO resource and facilitator, and is a school and media consultant. Dr. Tim and his wife Ann have worked with kids and parents since 1988. They created Camp Weloki. If I said that wrong, Dr. Tim, I'm super sorry. In 1991, which offers summer camp sessions and weekend retreats for girls throughout the school year. He talks about it during the interview, but I think the biggest piece that we walked away with was just check out his website because he's got everything in this one location. So whether you're interested in him speaking or the podcast or the camp, all of that can be found right on his website. So let's get to the interview so you can learn more about him and what he's got going on. Here's Dr. Tim. All right, Tim, I'm so excited to have you as a guest on the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm so excited. Okay, so let's just jump right in because I am that eager and it's the end of the day for me. So why don't you tell our listeners, we're starting way back with your journey. Where did you grow up and what was the messaging that you were getting about what you were supposed to do after high school?
Well, I grew up the third of 8 kids. So I had 2 older brothers, then 5 younger sisters in St. Louis. And so I lived there all the way through high school. And then I left for all my training. I was gone 13 years with my training. But, going back, thinking about the messages, I think I was trying to be a good boy back in those days. And so I grew up Catholic. And so I went to priest camp 2 summers for a week. I thought, being a pediatrician is something that I think that would please people. So I think back then I was trying to conform so I wouldn't get yelled at. I wouldn't get criticized. So I was just a kid who was the good kid, got good grades, kind of flew under the radar, which was a good thing in many ways. In other ways, maybe it wasn't.
Yeah. Well, and as you're talking to, I'm just thinking like, oh my gosh, this is one of those situations too, where it's like, unless we're really, really clear on what it means to be quote unquote good,
yeah,
you could be operating a certain way, thinking that you are subscribing to what it is that you're driving towards. And other people outside of you could be looking and saying, hey, you're not measuring up, or here's what's going on. So there's just an opportunity for disconnect. And I'm just using that as a play on words, hence the title of this podcast being Success is Subjective. So here you are, really like you're just trying to be a good boy. So what did you end up doing after high school?
Well, but one of the messages which you just mentioned, which I brought from my childhood, was I was not good enough. Having 2 older brothers who were bullying me and putting me down, and I was kind of short, so I was always scrambling to keep up with the big kids. So I developed this belief system that said I was never good enough, and so I became uber competitive. When I went to college, I wasn't sure what my major was going to be. I worked with kids my whole life. I umpired core league baseball. I worked at summer camps. I babysat. So I always knew I wanted to work with kids. I took care of my 2 youngest sisters a lot. They were 9 and 10 years younger than me. So that I was clear about. I didn't know how. So I started in some education classes, pre-med, just in case I decided to be a pediatrician. And after 2 years, I decided to go to medical route for a lot of reasons. And so I ended up going to medical school. Then I did a 3-year residency in pediatrics to become a pediatrician. Then I did a 2-year fellowship in something called Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics. But anyway, so that was kind of my training. And then I got plopped out when I was in my early, mid-30s, having never really sat back and said, what do I want?
Oh my gosh. The $1 million question.
Yeah.
What did you want?
Well,
Tim, I'm so curious in that moment.
What I thought I wanted was to do general pediatrics and then do some developmental stuff for a few years, then decide what do I want to do. And I'd figure it out. But after 2 years in a small town doing general pediatrics, I joined a guy. We were inundated with calls. I was on call every other night, every other weekend. We had two and a half kids. The third one was on the way. And I had decided when I was a kid, because my dad had to work long hours to afford 8 kids, I decided when I have kids someday, I'll be there for them. And I could see the handwriting on the wall. I was not going to be there for them. So I decided flexibility was key. I wanted to be in charge of my schedule and for it to be flexible so I could do lots of different things. So that became kind of like the direction I chose. I didn't really have a plan other than I didn't want to do this. So I started, I went up to St. Louis, opened up a practice, just started to counsel kids. And then my wife and I developed a business over many years. We started adding things. So we've done so many things over the years. We taught parenting classes. We taught an adult retreat. This is our 34th summer of summer camps for girls. Weekend retreats for 34 years. We have a school program to work with classrooms of girls. We had a radio show for about 8 years. We travel and give talks. We do a lot of things. But that's what I wanted. I wanted to be able to do a lot of things and not be like stuck in an office 5 days a week.
Yeah. Yeah. What I'm hearing you say is you're talking about like you were very values aligned, right? You were identifying what are my values. My values are quality time with family, right? Like not allowing work to overtake that. And by focusing on the importance of like being accessible, being available and flexibility, it allowed you to pursue all of these fun and creative, like pieced experiences that still filled you up professionally and personally, I'm sure, but more importantly, allowed you to be a present parent.
Yes. And one of the things I've realized now, because I'm not a spring chicken anymore. I've been in practice now, gosh, I don't know how long, 35 years, 40 years or something. But anyway, I became really good without even knowing it at identifying and following my urges. So when opportunities would cross my path, I didn't really think it through when I was younger. Like I had this hardcore plan and it all fit in my plan. It's more like an opportunity came, sounded like fun. I don't know, I was drawn to it, so I did it. And that's how we developed all those things, is I followed my gut, followed my urges without even really oftentimes being that conscious of it.
And look where it's led you, right? Like living your best life. Okay, so I'm going to ask you this, having heard you kind of rattle off all of the things that you're doing and or have done like for, decades. Do you see yourself as successful?
Yes, because I did it my way. I found my path and I followed my path, even though I got some flack for it. My parents always said, don't you want to be a doctor? After all these years, I kept saying, I am a doctor. I'm just doing it different. I veered off the medical path, which is, I'm not saying it's hard to do, but it's somewhat unusual because we had this vision of this is what a doctor looks like. This is what a doctor does. And so the hard part was I didn't have a plan, number one. I didn't really have a template to follow. And so I had to sort of forge my own path. But I teach the girls I work with something I call my dot theory. And I asked them, do you ever do one of those connect the dot drawings? And most people have said, oh, yeah, I've done those. So I said, so your life is like that. You're finding your calling.
Yeah.
So dots represent experiences across your path. When you look at the dots, you're like, what is that? I don't know. I have no idea. So you don't need to know the final picture. Just when those dots cross your path, you follow them. Then that dot leads to another dot, which leads to another dot. And then before long, like at my age, you can look back and go, oh, I see now how all that sort of connected. But it's about trusting your gut, just trying different things, following your urges, and those dots end up unfolding for us, as opposed to what the culture is teaching our girls today, which is you need to have a plan, you need to have a goal, you have your whole life figured out by the time you're 16, which is not the way it is for most people.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question, because this is, as you were just like filling the audience in kind of on that, like really describing that, like what the image looks like, connecting the dots and kind of pursuing that path. How did you end up specializing in specifically working with girls?
Well, after counseling girls and boys, in our summer camps, our weekend retreats used to be co-ed. And after, I don't know, 20-ish years of that or 15 years of that, in the office especially, I got burned out seeing boys. Maybe 2/3 of my practice there for a while was boys. And I didn't know what to do with a 13-year-old boy who wasn't motivated in school. They're tougher, at least for me, they were tougher to get through to have conversations with. Maybe it's just my lack of expertise, but girls for me were much easier. I grew up with all those girls, sisters. I always had a special place in my heart. I think I do a good job of connecting with them. And so we just slowly but surely, we started to not see boys in the practice. And then we had a couple weekends with just girls and to see how it would go. And it was amazing not having boys there to distract them. And I also realized there's a need for girls to have a safe space to sit in a circle and to be able to talk to their peers about what's real and what's going on and to be authentic and to get feedback. It became clearer and clearer, like these girls really need this space.
Yeah. I was only curious to kind of hear you, and I didn't want to assume that because you had all of those younger sisters that was really that was where it kind of started, but I kind of figured that was a part of the journey and the path.
Yeah.
But it makes sense. I think there will continue to be a need for girls need to connect with girls, right? Or there's an opportunity for young men to get together and they can talk about struggles that young men are dealing with. But as a provider, I think that's just so profound too, for you to be able to identify who do I work well with, and then totally channel connecting with those people, because that fills you up, right? It makes you not cringe going into work because you're dealing with somebody you're I don't really know how to motivate you, how to help you, because you're just we're not on the same plane right now.
Yeah, there was a moment when I was complaining to my wife about the boys. I was I'm getting tired of these boys. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, who's in charge of your schedule? Who's in charge of your life? You're in charge of this. So that's why I said, I'm going to stop seeing boys. And the same thing with camp. I was I'm in charge. I was 50-ish. I was what am I waiting for?
Yeah.
I enjoyed some of the boys. It wasn't it was horrible, but it's just it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't filling me up. I wasn't excited to do it.
Yeah.
And working with the girls at camps, retreats, and really, I think being of service to them just gave me a lot of joy. It still does.
Yeah. So let me ask this question, because I think that there's going to be parents listening to this that are hold the phone. How do I learn more about what Tim is doing? Because, you started to rattle off all of these different things. I just want to learn more. So how do they find you? How do they learn about what it is that you're doing?
I guess the website, just www.dr, like drtimjordan.com. And everything we do, the camps, I've written 7 books, and I've done 380, I think, podcasts. All those episodes are under the podcast thing. All the things that we do, we have all kinds of services, the camps, the retreats, blah, blah, blah. All the things that we do are on there. So that's the easiest way.
It's the catch-all for every interview, every resource related to the work that you're doing. Okay, that's fantastic. What a great, one-stop shop.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's evolved over time. We had to evolve. My wife was a nurse. We met, I was in med school, and she was in nursing school. We met romantically in the med school library. And in 2 days, we'll have been married 44 years. So 45 years ago, we met in the library. But we didn't have a business background. And so, I had all these dreams. I had this vision, sort of. So we had to sort of learn, especially my wife. She runs our business. She does all that stuff. But we had to learn how to be business people and to own a business and run a business and hire people and, blah, blah, blah. That was a big shift for us because being in the medical field, we didn't really have any background.
Right. You were educated literally to work with, individuals or people, but not do the administrative side of the business, right? You were educated on how to care for somebody.
And my wife has done a lot of sales. She used to enroll people in the weekend retreats for adults. And we have a camp director who does the campers, but we travel 8, 10, 12 times a year giving talks to different groups. So she does those things. She's the contact person. So she does a lot of things, but so she's obviously learned over the years. She's really good at it. But she's learned how to do all of that as part of the business without us ever really having a plan. We just evolved. That's the best way I think of saying it.
Yeah, I love it. Well, and talk about leaning into
Actually, I think that kind of goes back to your comment too about the urges, right? Like following, hey, we're going to own this business. We're going to have several businesses, but we got to figure out how to operate a business, because like you can't just operate a business and not figure out how to have customers or how to actually operate it. So sounds like the two of you were a good pair to kind of pursue that path.
I think we're very passionate about what we do. And all along the way, we've been fortunate. We've attracted people who supported us. Even like our camp counselors now. We have some camp counselors who've been with us for 25 years. They love camp. Because we're 34 years old now, a lot of our camp counselors now are ex-campers, girls, now women, in high school, college, 20s, 30s. But we've always had really supportive people. Yeah. And one of our camp parents says that your staff is your secret sauce. And that's a fun way of saying it. But he's right. We would not be able to do anything without our staff and people like that over the years.
Wow. Honestly, when I hear about like programs that have like tenured staff, I always look at that as like, ooh, there's some like really good organizational culture going on. And honestly, the secret sauce is not even just those young people, right? Like continuing to be showing up. I think it actually like that trickles down from the top in how it is that those people are supported, probably cared for, and even want to come back. So I think this is me giving you like a tip of the hat for obviously being a part of creating that secret sauce. Okay, so we will make sure that we've got links in the show notes for your website. We're just like rapid fire. I really just want to kind of ask one piece of advice as a parting question. So the majority of my podcast audience are parents of late adolescents or, young adults. And so oftentimes too, they're coming to my podcast because they're looking for validation or having normalized that it's going to be okay, right? If my kid takes a break from college, it's going to be okay. Or if they don't go to school, it's going to be okay. So just kind of having that in mind, I'm curious if there's anything that you can share as a parent yourself, like personally and professionally, wearing both of those hats at the same time. If there's a piece of advice that you can share with parents that are dealing with young adults or late adolescents right now, something that would be helpful for them to hear right in this moment.
Oh gosh, a lot of things. One of them would be trust yourself, but also your kids need to learn to trust themselves, to trust their urges and their gut and all those sorts of things. And I think they need a level of self-awareness. That's one of the things we do with our camps and retreats is we social emotional intelligence kind of learning where they become much more self-aware. They learn skills about self-quieting and accessing their intuition and relationship skills and all those kinds of things. They need those sorts of skills if they're going to be able to, when they're 18, decide, am I going to go to college or not? Or halfway through college, am I going to take a gap year? Or when they graduate from college, now what? And they need, a lot of young adults today have a hard time coping with, I think, the normal ups and downs of life. And I interviewed on one of my podcasts last year some high school seniors who were scared to death about growing up. And so what they got to by the end of the podcast was, I think the reason we're so scared of all that is because our parents did too much for us. And because they did too much for us, we didn't get a chance to overcome adversity and handle our own problems and speak for ourselves and all those kinds of things. So we lack the confidence and the optimism that would tell you, I know I can make it. I know I can overcome obstacles because I haven't done that yet. And so I think if you all along the way allow your kids to take care of themselves and to solve their own problems and to make their own decisions and then live with the positives, if they make a good choice, they make a mistake, live with that. They need all that growing up so that all of a sudden at 18, you don't say, okay, now I'm going to let go and dump you off. It's like, well, no, I prepared you for 18 years. And I think if kids have that sort of self-awareness, then I think they'll make good choices for themselves. And if they decide a year later it wasn't what I wanted, they can change. Nobody is stuck. I think they get this message from our culture today. There's this one path. We're all supposed to jam all of you on it. And you shouldn't veer off the path because this is the path to quote unquote success, which is a good job and make lots of money. Yeah. I preach that all the time to girls in my office. I'll say, what are you going to do after high school? Do you have any ideas? And they go, they look at me like, I'm going to go to college, like you idiot. And I'll say, but then here's the thing. I'll say, why do you want to go to college? And then it gets interesting. You probably do the same thing, because many of them will say, they'll look at me and they'll go, well, and they don't have an answer. Because nobody's ever asked them questions like, why would you want to go to college? Why do you play soccer?
Yep.
Why do you do anything you want to do? You just start thinking for yourself. And if you do that all along the way, then I think that's one thing the parents can do to prepare their kids to make good choices.
Yeah. You and I could probably riff for a while about just that. And I think the biggest thing that for parents listening, anytime we ask that question, like, why are you going to college? If a part of the answer doesn't tie to like being a student, like the awareness and understanding that college is optional, continued education, if that's not a part of what it is that they reference, and if obviously you got to have more information too. Maybe they were struggling in high school for whatever reason. It just breeds to me the perfect opportunity for like a real significant situation or scenario that they could find themselves in, which then ends up being perceived or internalized as I am a failure, right? Or like I'm an imposter, which we want to avoid that altogether. I love asking the question why. And I'm so glad that you ended on that because it's so important.
And, one of the things I do with girls in my practice, in my camps, retreats, is we have something we call the cycle of beliefs or a spiral of beliefs, where here's this perfect little kid and then something happens and they have all these emotions because it's it was hurtful or whatever. But then they go into their heads and they start asking questions like, I wonder why those girls are ditching me. Why are they leaving me out? Why doesn't my dad ever want to see me after the divorce? Why? And as you know, they answer those questions in their head with their own private logic, which is almost always faulty. And they start to develop thoughts and then beliefs that says, I'm not good enough, I'm not enough, I'm not lovable, I can't trust people, all those kinds of things. And then when they show up in the world with that in their head, they're not going to have the kind of life that they want, because that's what's going to guide their decisions and their behaviors.
Yeah, they're not going to be able to tackle the adversity that's thrown at them because everybody, you won't live a life without some adversity. So it just really sets them up for feeling like they are incapable.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Tim, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. I know that there are parents listening to this that are going to be really curious to learn more about you, and also just appreciate you sharing your personal story leading to what it is that you're doing now professionally. And so obviously it's evident to me that you are here on this earth to help young people that you're helping. And so I want to express my gratitude for the work that you're doing because it's really important. And so in addition to being a guest on the podcast, just thank you for showing up.
Thank you very much. And the other thing is, it's always been fun and fulfilling. So that's when I also knew I was on the right path. If it's fun, if it's fulfilling, no matter what you're doing, then you're on the right path.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. We want to thank our guest for joining Joanna on the show this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email Joanna at lilleyconsulting.com. Be sure to check out the lilleyconsulting.com website for additional resources outside of podcasting. Now, if you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on other popular podcast apps, such as Audible, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Thanks again for listening in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.